Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. Today I would like to take a look at what is expected to release for Star Citizen in 2026. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Thank you all so much for the support. Cannot do this without you guys. Also, in celebration of CitizenCon, GameGlass are doing a special 20% off discount until the 11th of November. So if you would like to convert your phone or tablet into your ship's dashboard, then follow the link in the description and make sure you use the code SMB2955. And also, any sale made does support my channel with a direct kickback, and a huge thank you to all of you who have used it so far. So Star Citizen this year, in 2025, has been all about getting the persistent universe into a much more playable and stable state, albeit 4.3.2 has had a lot of problems, but fixing many long-standing bugs, improving quality of life, and continuing to balance what we have with ships and weapons and the economy, seeing a lot of alterations. We also saw a huge amount of narrative content leading the charge this year, fleshing out the verse with more points of interest, more missions, and storylines to follow along with. And as we heard at CitizenCon this year, this is not going to stop going into 2026. However, one big benefit of moving into 2026 is how they have spent a lot of this year continuing to build out many new features and systems in the background, while also pushing to get Squadron 42 ready to release. So where does that put us for 2026? Well, we know they want to keep a similar patch release cadence for 2026 with regards to content and storyline rolling out, much like this year, while also trying to continue maintaining what we have. But the big difference being, lots of the stuff that they have been working on in the background will also begin making its way into the verse. So essentially, we should see the best of both worlds, with regular patches of content and continuing to maintain what we have, plus new big features that will change the way the game feels and plays. And I think it is safe to say that this time next year, Star Citizen is likely going to feel completely different. Now this is because of the following features that are set to roll out next year, which I will just quickly reel off now as kind of a TLDR list, but this isn't everything. There is still a lot of other very influential mechanics, systems, content to come, but these are just the real big game changer features that will change Star Citizen from when they release. We have engineering, base building, crafting, the Genesis planet tech, the new flight model and all that entails, the new signature system, FPS and ship radars and scanner updates to go along with it, hacking, economy updates and balance continuously, many new missions with the new mission system and just this continued narrative storyline, and of course Squadron 42's polished mechanics that will start rolling over into the PU. And if it is possible as well, potentially Maelstrom and StarWear, which I suspect will be coming out next year, but they haven't specified so. Now all of these will make what we have currently feel very different, but there is also a lot of things that I've not mentioned slated to release next year, so let's delve a little further into what is coming to the persistent universe in 2026. In fact, let's start with Squadron 42, as the intended release of this single-player campaign will impact the PU in many ways, provided it does release next year, of course. For one, more devs should be making their way over to the PU. Now, we could argue that they will also move on to Chapter 2, which I'm sure they will, but the developers working on a game at the end of its cycle versus the beginning of its cycle are very different, and I do feel they will try to shift gears into 1.0 mode versus moving on to Chapter 2. But it also means that more players should come and join the project, if the release goes well, of course, but more importantly for the persistent universe, it will mean a huge amount of polish for systems that we currently have in areas that may be problem areas, as Squadron shares a lot of aspects with the persistent universe and vice versa, which they are currently polishing to the standard of a finished product. Of course, it needs to be a finished product if they're going to release Squadron, so things like player animations, their movement, AI, ships, the MOBIGlass, UI, and so much more. All of this needs to be at the standard of not just a finished AAA game, but I hope in Squadron's case, a quadruple A game, the first true quadruple A game. And a lot of that will be able to just come straight over to the persistent universe. Although I'm sure some of it will need to take a bit of time to be adapted to a multiplayer environment, but the point being, even if you have no interest in Squadron, its completion and eventual release will do wonders for the persistent universe. Now, one new update that I think everyone is pretty excited to see come along is the Genesis Planet Tech. Now this, next year, will begin rolling out, starting with the planets of the Nyx system, and then redoing the planets of the Stanton and Pyro system, and then of course, further fleshing out Castra and Terra as they approach the goal being 1.0. Now I would love to know how fast a full system, or even a full planet, can get generated to this level of quality with the attributes that it needs, as this will absolutely dictate the rate of getting the rest of the verse out to us. But for now, what Genesis brings is pretty outstanding, not just from a visual standpoint, with it being clearly a huge quality improvement, but from a systemic standpoint and all of the other mechanics for mining and farming and weather and seasons and so much more. This will be an absolute joy to watch roll out over the course of 2026, and it will redefine everything about Star Citizen's worlds in the verse, and hopefully stop us falling through them. That would be a big win. Now, talking about mining, many of the updates coming next year will massively change how minables are distributed, and hopefully even open up to the possibility of new mining methods like subsurface mining, mining veins, and other possibilities. Now, it will also make mining feel a lot more logic and reward knowledge and experience, as seasoned miners will know where to go to find each material or mineral type. We have also heard that next year we will see mining missions, salvaging missions, and refueling missions, so it will be great for those looking to utilize their industrial ships in a more consistent manner. Also, looping back to Genesis, with the soil type, soil quality, and all the other sort of flora attributes, we may even see farming start to make its way into the verse in some manner, as it is intended to be a 1.0 feature, but it hasn't been mentioned at all during CitizenCon, so it is likely something to come post 2026, maybe in the year after, but we could hear about work starting on it next year. Now, something that I expect next year, as mentioned during CitizenCon Direct, is both crafting and base building. So crafting will hopefully be entering the tech preview this year for a little bit of testing before its intended release next year, which in itself will be one of the most impactful contributors to deciding what we get up to in-game, as it will drive many reasons to go anywhere and do anything. But base building was mentioned by Chris Roberts right at the end of the show, with him saying, base building, trade tools, and social updates are in active development and are very much a priority. So I certainly think we will see the beginning of base building come along next year, with at least that grav cart, potentially the FM Argo vehicle, and possibly the Starlancer build, but obviously trade tools, the social update for next year. I really hope so, but I'm not sure, as we haven't seen much on trade tools. And for the social updates, last we heard was once the transport refactor is complete, they will then move on to bringing the social refactor, which is kind of a nice segue. The transport refactor, as we read in a recent monthly report, is now at a level of parity with the original transit system. But of course, they don't want to stop there. They want to keep taking it further and have it functional with instanced hangars and anything that's making it more future-proofed. So I do suspect that we will see the transport refactor release next year, and hopefully they have already and will continue to make great progress on the social refactor with much needed and improved VoIP systems, party systems, and all of those org tools that we saw at CitizenCon a couple of years back. That would be a big win. Now, one new feature, as mentioned in the absolute game changer list, was engineering. And as we get closer to the end of the year, with currently no sign of the Vulkan API making its way onto the persistent universe, not that it won't get there by the end of the year, just that time is passing, we will most definitely see engineering make its way to the persistent universe in 2026. This, of course, will change how ships work, being very systemic, removing that artificial soft death and having ships accurately disable and be boardable, but also means we can bring them back from pretty much death. And it will be far more viable to do so, both from an in-game financial and timescale standpoint. It also might mean that hacking can come along, which last we heard they are working on a tutorial to help players understand how this system works. And if engineering and hacking comes along in a similar time frame, which I think is probably the intention, as both systems will utilize this resource network, it could mean that we will be able to hack doors and other systems like life support, ship systems, while offering options on how to counter-hack. So this will definitely lead to some interesting organic gameplay, or even missions surrounding the need to disable a ship, hack into its systems, shut down the shields, or open the doors, and then board and take control for whatever reason. So 2 very important systems, which I definitely expect to see next year. Continuing on with the major vehicle game changers, the new flight model should be rolling out next year, likely not until at least midway through the year really, as I suspect they will want to conduct many more tests with this new testing group that they chop and change the users based on the ships they're testing and the flight model they want to incorporate. But alongside all of the engineering systems, flight will feel more real in atmosphere and hopefully a lot more enjoyable and wholesome, catering for all types of ships and scenarios. So flight of all kinds, for all ships, big and small, and not just for combat, but every single aspect of flight in the verse will hopefully be where it needs to be and not changing again. Aside from general balance, of course. And then I can finally get in and start properly practicing. Now, another area that has been in heavy development for a long while that should be rolling out next year is both FPS and vehicle radars and scanners, and the new signature system overall. Now, this will help to really push Star Citizen's persistent universe into a place that can make things feel more final by removing much of that pointless UI, things like god markers, mission markers telling us where to go and what to do every second of the day, relying more on our own helmets and ship scanners and radars to help us understand the world. It'll also tie heavily into StarWear, I suspect, having more bespoke radars for our helmets based on their role, so mining, salvaging, combat, each helmet revealing specific information related to that profession, and it will pave the way for proper exploration, bounty hunting, and data running, and give scanning ships a true identity and their ability. Now, talking of StarWear, as much as we haven't heard much about this recently, and nor at CitizenCon, I fully expect this system to come along next year, and hopefully it will mean suit lockers as well, as that would be a real quality of life addition. But StarWear will give meaning to having more than just the one outfit every time, swapping out armor or clothing depending on what you're doing that day, providing benefits and trade-offs for each profession. It'll also mean being able to combine clothing and armor for a much greater range of outfits. Now, things that we know we will see coming along next year are more missions, more points of interest, and the narrative storylines. Rock Cracker for one, strike teams, instanced content, the mission system 2.0 will likely be fleshed out more next year, if not completely. And as mentioned earlier, mining missions, salvaging missions, and refueling missions. There is an abundance of content coming next year to further flesh out the verse with things to do on all scales for everybody while working towards that big overarching 1.0 storyline. They are heavily pushing out many points of interest too that have content associated with them continuously. Should you want to take part in that content again and again, of course, like Hathor, Lazarus, the Rock Cracker locations or stations, ASD and such, or just simply use them as points of interest to visit and explore, looting what you can or taking shelter. And with instanced content coming soon, many locations will feel more like the dungeons in Elder Scrolls and cater for every type of player, be that PvP, PvE, solo, combat, industrial or social, and anything else that we might fancy at any given time. So choosing what to do when you want to do it outside of just the organic nature of Star Citizen's PU. And then finally, although I think priority right now is getting the planets of Nyx sorted first, and then Stanton and Pyro, I also suspect we will see progress on Castra this year, and potentially Terra. Now, as I said, when talking about Genesis, how fast can CIG create a planet or a system will be very interesting to know, as this will determine not just how fast we can get the systems on and planets of 1.0 complete, but the rest of the verse from there out. Will we see Castra come to the persistent universe by the end of the year? I think it is highly possible. Of course, if it doesn't contain the planets like we see with Nyx this year, with them rolling out Castra's planets in 2027, for example, then absolutely, why not? But let us see how it goes with getting the planets of Nyx out, updating the old planets, and then see what they're going to do with the other 1.0 systems. Anyway, I hope this video has highlighted what 2026 is potentially going to be like. Of course, seeing all of what I mentioned here come along next year is unlikely, especially as many of these mechanics and systems will need to have some form of initial testing on the tech preview channel first, before it is even close to coming to the PU, so that could slow up some of the features from rolling out quicker, but it is a necessary step. But as mentioned at the beginning, there are many actual game changer systems coming, and 2026 is going to see a lot of this stuff roll out. I am excited to see where we will be by this time next year, and how close to 1.0 we'll get to. That said, do let me know what you are most excited for. For me right now, since CitizenCon, I think it is mostly Genesis, and what that opens up for all of the other types of gameplay. But if you do enjoy my videos, please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. Also, come and hang out over at twitch.tv/SuperMacBrother, or you can watch me live here on YouTube as well. A great place to hang out if you are getting back into Star Citizen, or if you are a new backer, and you are all more than welcome. Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind, it does the channel a big favour, and tick that notification bell if you'd like to be notified when my videos go live. Again, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.